I was awarded the Daniel Pearl Memorial Violin, which is given out every year at Mark O'Connor's String Conference in San Diego. I think I was just curious and asked my mom, you know, who was Danny? Who was Daniel Pearl? What was his story? Why is he so important? And it really, it shook me. It scared me.
We now believe, based on reports from the U.S. State Department and police officials in the Pakistani province of Sindh, that Danny Pearl was killed by his captors. We're heartbroken at his death. Danny was an outstanding colleague, a great reporter, and a dear friend of many at the Journal. His murder is an act of barbarism.
It was dark. I remember it was dark and it was freezing cold, and I was all alone in the house, and I got this call. And I don't even remember who called me, telling me that he had been murdered and they had conclusive evidence of it.
We will, in coming months, find ways, public and private, to celebrate the great work and good works that Danny did. But today is a day to grieve.
And I just remember standing there, frozen, like not able to move. It was then that I realized that I had to do something, and I didn't know what, and I didn't know when. And music had to be a big part of that, because that's what my friendship with him grew from. It's more than just an art form. It's a vehicle to do something positive.
I'm grateful to Todd for having this event here, because it gives everyone a chance to be more lighthearted. Mm. You know, there's this feeling of heaviness still. But of course, if you know Danny and his beautiful smile and his spirit, there's that feeling that will be forever. So there is that feeling of celebration of him that happens.
After the second year, I started realizing the way it was resonating with people. This is that thing that I told myself I had to do.
Yes, this is the start. If you will listen now, this guitar has got it on.
I think that me and Danny certainly have a love of music in common.
I think it was the music. It brought us together.
To build that relationship from music, I think that's like the most fantastic thing.
More and more young people were participating in FODFEST, and we saw this as an invitation to engage youth in cross-cultural dialogue through songwriting and multimedia. In 2010, we began working in high schools where cultural, ethnic, and social divisions are palpable.
You're beautiful, so close your eyes and breathe in the world. Just try to find who you are, turn up the music, turn down the world.
Students work together to write, record, and publicly present an original song and video that speaks to something important to them collectively. It had always been about the music, but from the onset we had been filming FODFEST simply as a way to document the concerts. A couple of years in, we recognized the opportunity for multimedia to convey a positive message, in contrast to the negative way it was used in Danny's murder.
We live in a world of digital media. It's how we communicate with each other and with the world. So it made a lot of sense to have a program where youth can learn to write a song and produce a video as a way of sharing what matters to them. We encourage them to see this not only as an opportunity, but also the responsibility they have to be mindful and make choices about the message they're putting into the world.
We'd argue a lot. We'd say, no, we want this, we want this. But when it came time to sit down and to start working on the song, to rap, to sing, we put whatever differences we had beside us, because we knew we had this project and we knew we had to put 100% of our effort into this one song.
Together we can do it. I can change my mind. I can do anything.
Even if we don't even actually like each other, we can learn to appreciate each other while we put aside our differences and work towards that common goal, so that maybe even in the end we can actually become friends.
It did feel really empowering to be a part of it because everybody had something to contribute.
I usually just, somebody puts words in front of me and I sing them. That's usually how it goes. But I felt I had a lot bigger of a part in this. I felt okay to give my opinion and my suggestions because I knew it wouldn't just be shot down immediately and that they were actually considered, which was very nice.
The weather will face us together, don't you know?
The youth programs were transformative and proved effective in crossing cultural, religious, and ethnic lines. All along, I'd been thinking about my friend Danny and why he was murdered and how we could address that. To me, Jerusalem is the crossroads of the Abrahamic faiths, where those cultural, ethnic, and religious divides are most profoundly felt. So in 2010, we collaborated with partners to implement our programming in the region.
Today there was a terrorist attack.
Last summer there was the war in Gaza. Horrible things happened.
We are living in bad times now.
We were born into the conflict and there's a lot of rage all over the country.
We're together in the same country. We should to be together.
We keep on hoping for better future.
Who is free? No one, nobody is free. A fact that can't be denied, that we should live as good neighbors. We believe children are a white page through which we can fill anything without any kind of prejudice or discrimination.
It's not always an easy mission to try and convince the pupils at the beginning to join the program.
Some students say that how are we gonna get together, you're Jewish, you're Arabs, like they're talking like, I don't know.
Never, ever, Arabs and Jews get along, and I'm talking from my point of view in real life.
They think we will want to fight them because of a few students in our school that actually does that. So it's difficult.
You don't know the intention of each one of them, like they don't know ours, so.
You grow up with this, you grow up with a monster on the other side and a monster on the other side. And it grows and it grows and it grows. You need to have some kind of light, you have to have some kind of positivity. Because in the last few years, all you have is darkness.
When I close my eyes, I see only dark, but I don't know, I think that there is something beyond darkness, and we can think and take ourselves to a better place.
We need to give the pupils the stage, the platform to speak about how they feel, and yet I also think we need to focus, this is what happened, but where are we going to go next?
I want to be a part of something that can make a difference in the world.
I want to change something.
I'm ready for change.
We're going to, as a group, have a discussion about what we would like the song to be about. Stop the fighting.
Maybe about friendship.
Friendship. Peace.
And all I think is how I will get my payback now. But again, in all this fear and blame,
maybe we could find our way again.
We pray to the same God with different religion.
Power is when you have the reason to hate someone, but you don't.
They're talking about the conflict. They're telling their painful stories, and they make music from those stories, and I think this is what is very special.
We were very nervous, but when they came and talked with us, I found them very, very friendly. It's good to make a relationship with others.
Although we're so different, we still want the same things. I mean, the same dreams and the same hopes. And that when we are walking together, there is something very beautiful we can create.
I feel that, more than the songs, and the songs are really cool, and the videos are really cool, but I think more than that, for 2 days, that there's a person, not a monster.
So now I got to know everyone in here, and I felt comfortable and safe to be myself.
I think that the fact that we wrote a song and we combined both cultures and we made a song is something that we should be really proud of.
The way that you're able to articulate what happened between you and your fears, and you were able to do something that you may not have been comfortable with or something that you thought we couldn't do, is that you were able to communicate with each other.
I feel like something new happened because I had a different perspective about all this idea, the concept about getting to different schools from the Arabs and Jews, and it gives you different perspectives.
When you come around with all those people that you never knew them, it brings you so many things and tools for your life.
We are two people, we are Jews and we are Arabs, and we're never going to be the same. And that's wonderful, that's good. This is the world is all about. But maybe after those 2 days, those 15 students can understand that it is possible to work together, to talk with each other, and afterwards maybe we can be partners to social change.
Let's forget the fight and hold tight. Together we can reach the...
It reshaped my opinions. My opinions were strong and free, but now I think otherwise. I think that we can open up to people, and the music is the thing in common that is the biggest thing we can connect to.
Nothing happened, like we became friends. It's not a big thing that they're Jewish and we're Arabs.
Peace, peace in the Middle East. Peace is what we need.
Those circumstances are very different for our students in the United States and in the Middle East. We saw the same outcome. In both places, students who are empowered to communicate and collaborate really want to make change in the world. So we decided to bridge the gap between them.
After more than a year of planning, the first Mack International Youth Summit was set to take place in the summer of 2014. Nobody could have predicted the war would break out between Israel and Hamas and the challenges that would present. But despite those obstacles, we were determined and committed to see it through. And sure enough, 9 Israeli and Palestinian teens and 9 American teens came together for a week here in the States to write an original song and produce a music video.
Hi, my name is Shakir and I'm from Israel.
Hi, I'm Jesse and I'm from Great Barrington.
Hi, my name is Batel. I'm from Israel, but originally from Ethiopia.
Hi, my name is Zoya. I'm from South Sudan.
Hey, my name is Maya. I'm from Palestine.
Hey, I'm Ruth. I'm adopted from Kazakhstan and I live in Portland, Maine.
Hey, my name is Shadi. I'm from Palestine, but I live in Israel.
In Israel right now is a war.
You all know what's going on in my country now, and I want to be clear that we are fighting for peace and we want peace.
The issues of what's going on and what has happened in the past month in Israel, it's all over the news here too.
We need to address what's going on over there. I think that let's just let that happen organically.
I think we need to write about the war and how much people we lost.
We can't forget where we came from and what happened in our country, and we need to say that. We have to say that. We can't just, okay, peace, and that's it.
I don't think writing about Gaza and Israel now is a good idea. Like, how about we write like a beautiful song?
In the beginning, we can write about all the things that happen, all the situation, and then in the end, we can just like say the things that we want to say, that the change is with us, and we can make the change.
It's good because that's what we're doing here. So I think it's the best idea.
We can say like life conflicts and then like put examples and like
Okay. And the big example is Israel.
I think that peaceful and freedom kinda they're the same.
There are a ton of different cultures here, but like fundamentally we're all the same. So maybe that, I don't know.
Individually, we can make little changes, but if a lot of people make little changes, we can change the world as a collective.
But we write music language everybody can understand.
So close your eyes
Yeah.
and open your ears. And I actually think that's a really Did you write that line?
He was killing it, yeah.
That's a really great line. If we were to say that could be the chorus, and Raish, what was your idea for a chorus?
People let us change, people let us be, we want to live, we want to fly, we want to be free.
People let us change, people let us be, so we can live. We want to fly, we want to be free.
What is an idea that you could use to make this very unique in your own style of video?
We can focus on eye, black and white.
Like the person with their eyes open, and then when, it says, close your eyes, so on.
Yeah. Now close your eyes. Okay. Open your eyes.
So close your eyes, open your ears, listen to the sound of the music. Oh yeah.
In our day life, we don't really talk with Arabs. We just know the things that the news telling us about Arabs. In this project, I get to know Arabs really good, and actually, I really love them now, and we have a really good connection. I'm just angry that it's not like this, because here it's just like so easy. I don't know why, it's easier. You can just like see things really differently. Like you can see a rabbi and a priest and an imam just like sitting together, laugh with each other, accepting each other.
I just feel like meeting other people, getting to know you guys, like when we get older, we'll understand each other better. So that kind of gives me hope that, one day we'll all actually get along, because right now,
What gives me hope is that we all have the power to influence the upcoming generation and each other, and if we use that power to influence each other in a good way, the future will be much brighter.
We just got out of that bubble of war and hate and everything, and we just came to this place to just, to just make music and just have fun and sing and do the things that we love. It's a good thing to just come and do the things that you love to do with new people that you never had the chance to meet before, and to understand the other side. I thought that I'm the only one that's right, but now I can see that we all just victims of big people that do some big mistakes. So.
In the end, it is not. us unity. We stand strong, no need to fight.
Two wrongs never make it right. Love and war, two separate doors.
I'll be the change I'm looking for.
So close your eyes, open your ears, listen to the sound of the music. Oh yeah, open your eyes and you will find you can change yourself if you open your mind. Oh yeah.
In studio joining us today, we have Mr. Todd Mack, founder of Music in Common, singer, music writer, musician. How are you doing today, Mr. Mack?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Itai?
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. We just saw your produced film, From Madness to Music, and tell us a little bit about the film itself.
Sure. It's a overview of the 10-year history of Music in Common, from its very beginnings as an informal backyard jam in honor of my friend Danny Pearl's birthday, to an internationally touring nonprofit organization that does community building and empowerment with music and multimedia.
Music's been a part of your life for over 25 years. How has music influenced you in a way that you felt comfortable to open up such a program and bridge gaps between cultures?
I mean, I think that it's always been part of who I am, even before Danny was murdered. And I think his murder was sort of the catalyst or the call to action, if you will, to really embody what I believed in my heart, that music can change the world and can bring people together.
Was there a specific moment, something that influenced you, that brought you to this conclusion?
I mean, I think before Danny's murder, I have very vivid memories as a small child watching footage of the Woodstock Festival on the news on TV, and I think I was probably 4 or 5, but just completely, even at that young age, able to absorb the magnitude of that many people amassed in one place, all because of music. And there were other events in my life. When John Lennon was murdered, who was my biggest idol, I went down to Central Park where there was a vigil for him, and a very similar kind of experience to when I was watching the Woodstock news 11 years earlier as a kid. And although this time it wasn't so much about just bringing people together, it was this healing. The people were mourning his death, and I think when Danny was murdered, it was sort of a culmination of those kinds of experiences that triggered this idea that I actually need to put those beliefs into action.
Danny's murder was a shocking event around the world, and journalism sort of really felt it as the people that come to call themselves the tellers of truth and the bringers of light, if you will, to the dark areas of the world that no one is able to really pay attention to. And Danny's murder really highlighted that to the world, and you personally felt it as a good friend of Danny's, and Danny was connected to music. How do you feel he would feel about a program such as yours to bridge gaps between cultures and bring light to dark areas?
I think that, you know, it's really symbolic of who he was as a person and who he was as a musician. And this is sort of a shared, fervent belief between the two of us that there was something unique, some unique power, if you will, about music to connect people, to bring people together. And certainly, you know, he lived his life by that creed. I mean, this is a guy that no matter where he was traveling in the world, he would find a jam session to go sit in, just as a way to meet people in the local community, to learn about the local culture. I think it helped with his work as a reporter, just sort of really more deeply understand where he was and what he was writing about.
An interesting line from your film that we just got to watch. I thought there were quite a few very interesting lines, especially by some of those students, young students. Profound lines were said, the power is actually in not hating people, if I'm paraphrasing correctly.
Right.
And but really that music is a language that everyone understands. How is that a credence, a motto in your not-for-profit?
Well, I mean, really, the idea of music as a universal language is sort of the cornerstone of everything we do. And even quite literally, when you're working in a program where language is literally a barrier because the participants don't speak the same language, and we maybe conduct it in English as sort of a common denominator, but it's a second or third tongue for everybody. So it's really the music that is connecting people. And I think that's why they come, is because they come in with sort of a preconception of that idea.
What kind of musical background do you find your students already have? Could they come and join a program like this to be a part of it because they want to be a part of change? Or do they need to have some sort of musical background? Because they looked quite professional, all the students you had there.
It runs the gamut. I mean, actually, they do not need to have any musical training, and I would say that those who come from both schools, people who are very talented and they're really in it for the music. And then, some of the communities we work with, there's no music, so they're coming with not only no training, but really very little exposure to music. And but the common thread is, I think, this love of music and this idea, that it's a music is a way that it can connect them to one another, and also that it can be a conduit for amplifying their voices and what's in their hearts and on their minds.
A very interesting grieving process in psychology has been around for quite some time, musical therapy. It is being used now not just with humans, it's being used with animals. There are studies being done on the effects of music from the child in the womb all the way through child development. How have you found musical therapy helps with the grieving process on a personal level, and then I guess on an organizational level, because of what you went through with a good friend being murdered as Danny was?
Well, certainly on a personal level, it's been an enormous part of my life. I don't know that I don't know that grieving fully would have been possible without music and without that connection, that musical connection to Danny. And although our friendship grew into something much bigger and deeper than just playing in a band together, music was the catalyst for getting that friendship going. And I think as an organization, we're always looking for ways to implement music as a healing agent, and I think it always does that to some degree, and sometimes that's at the forefront of what that program is.
How much in common do you think your program has with what we have here at the IDC, the Daniel Pearl Institute for Journalism and Telling of Truth? How can they work in common? How can we bridge gaps between different organizations, all working really on the same basis of trying to bring light to dark areas, be it through journalism, Danny's chosen career, or Danny's chosen hobby of music? How can organizations work together? Because the more you have working together, the farther the reach, the more powerful the message becomes.
Right. So I mean, I think that the sort of the common denominator is this desire to implement best practices in journalism, this idea of truth speaking in song, that finding people who hold that of the highest priority, as Danny did and as I certainly do, is how you sort of collect this, put together this collective of agents and organizations working for real reporting, real songwriting, real video making based on truth, on factual evidence, without bias, and that the truth is the highest power.
And quickly, how do we, I guess the message gets out there, but how do you guys as an organization are able to recruit these students, the youth? How do they join up? Do they just find an office? Is it through the internet? Do they need to know someone? How do you guys come together? How do you find the right students?
Sure. I mean, there's a few different methods for that. We do quite a bit of work with schools and educational institutions, cultural and art institutions, and often they become the conduit for helping us recruit the students for the program. We're very active online, social media, Facebook especially, and YouTube. So that becomes a really good platform for us for doing outreach, and just old-fashioned word of mouth. And 11 years in, I think people around the world are learning about us.
It's interesting you brought social media up, especially with the generation that you guys are working with. Social media is almost another limb to the youth of today. They are attached to it in every capacity, computers, cell phones, in every way. They're always using social media. And sadly, we have seen social media also be used for hate, social media used for bullying. How do social media through your guys' program can combat some of the hate speech, some of the negativity that's brought forth through social media? As we know, people find themselves to be much more brazen when they're behind a screen and not speaking to someone to their face. How do they bring their unique skills as millennials to the table of social media to combat the hate that you see there?
Well, that's actually a great question, and it's not an easy one to answer, nor is it a challenge that's easy to sort of solve. And but one of the things that we instill throughout our programs with young people is the idea that this social media is a freedom. And like any other freedom, it needs to be handled very carefully and respectfully, and that so that with this opportunity, this freedom to say whatever you want, comes this responsibility to think about what it is you're actually saying and what that impact will be on those who you are saying it to.
And lastly, before we let you go, and we'll have the audience give an opportunity to ask a few questions as well, what's the, I guess, most direct, what would be the message you're trying to deliver on any given day through all of your platforms to the different people, to the different cultures that are battling themselves? What is, I guess, that light that's brought to the darkness? What's that message?
Sure. Is really the humanity in each of us, that if each of us can see ourselves in the other and the other in ourselves, it becomes a lot harder to hate. And if you can eradicate the hate, you'd solve a lot of the world's problems.
Excellent. That's Mr. Todd Mack, founder of Music in Common, joining us here on IDC International Radio. Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate your time and the showing of the video.
Thank you.
So how do you think that the journalism industry has changed post Danny's murder?
I'm not sure that it's changed, or maybe just sort of continued along a path that it's always been down. I think journalism, and I'm not a journalist by conventional definition, although I think a lot of what I do is journalism. It's very tricky to stay true to your core values when there are businesses involved, and you write for a paper, for example, and the paper stays in business by selling ads and making money. And how much of that then factors into how you write your story, how much of it is censored or not censored because of who it might or might not offend. I think those challenges are at an apex right now. As especially conventional media struggles to figure out how to make ends meet in a very digital world. I think social media, on the other hand, has sort of put to task journalists to stay on point and true to their ethics, because there are a lot of people watching them and a lot of people reporting on them and reporting the news themselves. And so I think it sort of raises the bar a little bit.
First of all, amazing work you do. It's absolutely admirable. I was wondering, because right now the project is going on in the States and also here in Israel/Palestine. Are you thinking of making it even bigger, combining more countries like Syria and more of the conflict areas, but also involve more of European countries, especially now during the whole terrorism going around the globe?
That's a great question. And we've also done some work in the Far East and in Taiwan and Hong Kong. But really, 11 years in, we're at a point where we're very focused on a few areas. And those areas sort of all go back to when I think about the reasons why Danny Pearl was murdered. And, you know, in my mind's eye, I see it. There are three very clear reasons why he was murdered. He was murdered by Muslim terrorists because he was a Jew. He was murdered by terrorists from the Arab world because he was an American. And he was murdered because he was a journalist trying to uncover the truth and share it. So as Music in Common moves forward, we try to keep those things sort of in our lens of where we focus our work, which is what brought us to Jerusalem originally, and then that has now led to us working throughout Israel and the West Bank. Because of that, we're very interested in seeing it spread to other parts of the Middle East. And we have already begun doing work in the States that I would like to see happen in Europe and other parts of the world, where we are bringing together Jewish and Muslim and Christian communities to work together in this program as a way to get to know one another better, to deepen the understanding not only of each other as people, but of their faiths. So all of those things are very high on our radar, and we're getting there as quickly as we're able to. Harold.
It's good to see you after a long time. I happen to be an organizer of one of the FODFEST, the Friends of Daniel Pearl, in Tel Aviv, that we do now for the last few years every summer, in the middle of July and middle of August, and we will do it again this year. So we're kind of involved and connected with the mission. And we've had Arab musicians playing, as you know. We've had international musicians playing with Israelis, and we continue to do so and try to create those good vibes. But I have a feeling that the current climate that's happening around the world, and you just came from Jerusalem where you almost witnessed a terrorist attack, and luckily you were not there. Had you been there like a little time before, you would have been in trouble. How frustrating is this for you when you see that what you're doing is very meaningful, but it's not really making a big impact? You're not really hitting the politicians, who are the people who are in charge and are really to blame for the situation that we all are in. This is an old story. So how do you feel about that? And what are you going to do about it? And how do you get people more riled up to, make some progress?
That's a great question. It's a big question, but it's a great question. And thank you, by the way, Harold. Harold was one of the first organizers of FODFEST event here in Israel, and we're very grateful. So really, you are a part of where we are today. This might sound like a strange answer, but the worse things get, it would seem the easier it is to lose hope and to just be full of despair. But I actually am the opposite. The worse it gets, the more inspired I get, the more urgent I see the need for what we do. The political question is a tough one because we're not a political organization and we don't work in the political world. But I often have these very animated discussions with friends who do work in the political sphere, especially here in the Middle East. My belief, my fervent belief, is that the work of political activists is critical, especially right now, as is the work of human activists like organizations like Music in Common. Because what I've seen over the course of history is that one cannot work without the other. So absolutely political reform is needed right now here in the region. But if there's not reform on the ground, people to people on a human level, political reform is not sustainable. I think you could look at my own country. You could look at the United States of America and the civil rights movement, where laws were changed, but attitudes and behaviors were not necessarily changed. We're still, 50 years later, 60 years later, fighting this huge hurdle of how you treat people with true equality and true freedom and justice, even when the laws are in place for that to happen. So absolutely, there needs to be political change, but it can't all be focused in the political arena. And I think that's what keeps the fire under me to keep doing what we do and to keep working on a people-to-people level and a human level. So that when the political reform is finally put into place, we're not starting from scratch, arguably like we did in the 1960s in the United States and are still, 50 years later, trying to figure it out.
I don't know if you've heard of the Jerusalem Youth Chorus. It's a YMCA group of Jewish and Arab, I'm not sure if they have Christian kids, who sing together year-round, and they do 2 hours of singing and an hour of kind of dialogue once a week. How is your program different from that?
I'm very familiar with the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, and they're a fantastic organization. I know Micah Handler quite well, and he's really amazing. And there are others. Heartbeat is another one. Ukuleles for Peace up north. I think that the fundamental difference between us and them is that they are based here, and so they are working on a more ongoing basis. And we are coming here and doing programming essentially twice a year for a few weeks at a time. This is a goal of ours, is to adopt more of the model of what they have, where there is ongoing, and even if it's not weekly, but at least monthly, get-togethers and follow-ups with the programs that we work in. Right now we have sort of these soft follow-up activities at the end of each school year. All of the groups, the pairs of schools that participated in our program come together for an event we call the Meeting of the Mics, where they perform their song, and it gives them an opportunity to meet other kids who have had this same shared experience. At the Youth Summit in the summer is another sort of follow-up thing, and we do a lot with them online using private Facebook groups set up for each program so that they can keep in touch with one another. Having staff here in Israel would be fantastic and is a very high priority of ours, something that we don't really have at the level that we'd like to have it at. And I think if we could get that in place, that we could start doing more of the kinds of things that Jerusalem Youth Chorus and Heartbeat do on an ongoing basis. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, as I said in the beginning, we're very honored to have you here at the Daniel Pearl, International Journalism Institute, where we aim to raise the awareness, basically, of the challenges that journalists face all over the world in covering the truth, in covering the region, in covering the terror attacks and all the different truths that are out there. I'm sure it's the beginning of a great collaboration between us. As Itai said before, I think organizations like us in different fields, it can be in music, it can be in journalism, in media, or whatever, can really make a difference and can talk about the difficult questions and solutions, possible solutions that we should find in order to change what's really going on now. And I have a question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Not slowing down, that's for sure. I would love to see Music in Common working in other regions of the Middle East. That's a very high priority for us. And doing it in a way that is creating people-to-people diplomacy, using the arts, using songwriting, using multimedia. I think that actually as the world moves into this sort of transmedia world, that the lines between conventional journalism, conventional news, and video and songwriting are blurred. They're really much smaller. You look at organizations like ISIS and Hamas. They make music videos as propaganda. That's not really any different than creating a news story that may be completely aimed at persuading people into a certain line of thought that has actually nothing to do with the facts or the evidence. It's not real reporting. It's just persuasion. So I think it's really going to become this one big ball of wax between music, media, news, journalism. So creating more diplomacy between Western culture and Middle Eastern culture is a very high priority for us. Also, sort of in the faith world, creating more diplomacy between Jewish and Muslim and Christian communities globally is a very high priority for us. I would say that those are our two top priorities at this point. And 5 years from now, I would hope to see the amount of programming that we're doing and the number of places that we're doing it in grow exponentially in those arenas.
Great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you.